ARF is Aircraft Rescue Firefighting, Air Station 6. And the aircraft landed without incident. That was the only MOR since our last meeting. No construction to report. We do have our annual Runway Safety Action Team meeting on May 23rd at 10 o'clock, typically held in this room, also available remotely if you want to join. I encourage everyone, anyone that operates on the airport to come to the RSAT meetings. It's a mandatory FAA meeting that we have to have, the airport has to have with the air traffic control tower every year to talk about runway safety issues and anything, construction related or anything that could cause safety issues on the airfield. So May 23rd at 10, I will obviously invite all of the AAC and anyone else that wants to attend. We can send them the link. It used to be we had to keep it pretty small because it was all in person, but now we have hybrid options. So that's coming up. And we have a great RSAT team. It's really good meetings because we all do it right here at the airport. Rob also wanted to let us know that he is still short. He has been short one air traffic controller for all of 2024. So they're operating with 4 up there instead of 5, and it's been a strain on. He said here that he's logged 1,150 overtime hours for the year for 2024. So that's a lot, And he said as it stands right now, he's expecting the current staffing to remain entering 2025. So a lot of folks are either in the military or picking up the FAA jobs from all the retired FAA controllers. So they're here for a year or two and then they're heading off to FAA towers. So that was everything from the tower chief. I'm happy to take any notes or questions back to Rob if anybody has any.
How about your report?
My report, yeah. So thank you, Chair. I didn't typically in the past couple of years I've been sending those as part of the packet, but because a lot of it was just regurgitating from the last couple of meetings, I do it verbally tonight. Just some updates. We have changes to the Airport Advisory Commission. Obviously, I want to thank first John Foley, who's here tonight. Doug Berneiser is not here for, I think they were both 8 years of service on the AAC. And typically you get 2 3-year terms, so that's 6. But both of these guys were filling in for somebody else did. So they've both been with us for 8 years. So that's a long time. And you've been chair, I think, for 6 of those. So I want to personally thank you and Doug. He has been great to work with, and obviously don't want you to feel like you're never welcome here. We talked earlier, Mike has been reappointed to serve a 2nd term, and so we're glad Mike's going to stay with us. And Rick Field and Ben Wigton have both been appointed to fill the 1st term that will expire December 31st of 27. And so welcome to you guys that had their orientation an hour ago. But they've attended 2 meetings already, so they were more oriented than any of you guys were when you first started. I think a couple of you started kind of over COVID, and our orientations were, I think that Colonel was that way too for a long time. We didn't meet in person, so okay. The other update is that Arnaud Verstoif, who's our Ward 2 representative, he was reappointed as well, but he has since submitted his resignation to the chair. So Arnaud will no longer be joining us. So we do have a vacancy in Ward 2 that we need to fill. We don't have any applications in the pipeline right now for any Ward 2 residents. So if anybody knows any Ward 2 residents, and I think all of Councilor Shioka needs to, I would encourage them to apply through the city's boards and commissions application website and fill the Ward 2 vacancy. So for the time being, we're going to have just 6. Doesn't change the quorum number. We still have to have 4 out of 6, but it's one less person that we'll have here. So, commercial service update for calendar year 2024. We processed a total of 54,186 passengers. That's a lot for this little building, but we did it really. I think we did really well, given that was our first full year of commercial air service. So that's a big number. The FAA's threshold for being a primary commercial service airport is only 10,000 enplanements. So if we have this as total passengers, we have about 27,000 enplanements. So we're now a primary commercial service airport. Much like the runway categorization, the primary commercial service airport designation will carry through at least through 2026. So we're eligible for additional funding, infrastructure funding in 2026. It goes up from a minimum of 150,000 a year to 1.3 million a year. So it's quite a big jump, which is great for us because there's a lot of infrastructure needs, both the terminal and out on the airfield. So that's a huge help. So, and I certainly expect that we'll clear that 10,000 passenger threshold this year and beyond, because it's really a pretty low bar to cross. So that was good. It was a good, full, successful year. Ongoing projects, so we have federal funding we've talked about in previous meetings. Congresswoman Salinas got us some congressionally directed spending dollars the previous fiscal year, $850,000 sitting in the FAA's hands right now, waiting for us to apply for it so that we can get that money for design and hopefully development of the terminal. And so what we're sort of in the pre-planning phase now, where we're trying to figure out what renovations we can do in the existing building, primarily this office space, now that we have a place to move to in the building next door. Renovations inside the existing shell are much less expensive than going outside the building. So we're working with our consultants to figure out how best to spend those dollars so that we can get the FAA everything they need in terms of terminal area planning and design, and hopefully some construction. We don't want to take the Congresswoman's generous spending offer and have a plan to put on a shelf. We want to actually have something to spend. So we're working with the FAA now to kind of reshuffle our CIP deck, where we can provide that level of detail to the FAA, but also preserve enough dollars to do some level of expansion here, primarily to get the gate seating area opened up. So one of our initial thoughts is that maybe we realign how the checkpoint is oriented, put that down into here, which would be unfortunate because we just paid a lot of money to put it up there. But if we can relocate that down here, then that opens up a third of that room, and it gets us an extra 100+ seats, which we really need. So that might be the quickest short-term solution. But those are the kind of thoughts that we're trying to have right now, so that we can present something to the FAA that they'll buy off on. So
Any of those align with the plans? There were like 3 options, I guess, when we did this, I don't know, a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Or is it
Kind of,
different?
but different. But that would be the first phase of what I think the second phase would probably touch on one of those, where that hold room actually gets a little bigger on the south end. But again, we're trying to be judicious with the funds. And so if renovating inside the building is a better first phase, so that money goes further than knocking down walls and having to do all the environmental stuff out there. So there's a lot of moving pieces there that we're working through with the FAA. So expect that we'll get that funding awarded to us in 2025 to start the planning and hopefully some of the design. And then we're still scheduled for some construction in 2026.
And that money, those monies are distributed through the FAA.
Through the FAA.
And they don't require any local matching.
They do.
They do
require local matching. Yeah. But in the last aviation bill that was approved by Congress just this last spring, the match requirement for small commercial service airports, non-hubs like Salem, is reduced from 10% match to 5% match. So that's a big deal. When you're using $2 million of funding, we only have to come up with 100,000 instead of 200,000. And the state's grant program helps us offset our portion of the match. So I typically get enough from the state. It's a little complicated, but I'm just going to get into the weeds a little bit, where they'll provide enough funding to cover 75% of our 10%. Or 5%, whichever it is. So the spreadsheets for capital improvement projects at the airport are really, really messy, because there's a lot of different funding sources. They don't all line up in terms of fiscal year. So federal fiscal year is not the same as the state and the city's fiscal years. And so sometimes we have to sit on dollars until we can get other dollars till we can move forward with the project. So you two will be a little bit behind the power curve on some of these projects that we're in the middle of, but we'll either offline or in other meetings, we can do presentations if you like. If the chair wants to, we can put some stuff up on the screen and walk through some terminal planning stuff if you like.
Is there a deadline on that one?
2027. It has to be awarded by 2027. That has to be spent 4 years after that. So we've got quite a ways to go yet, which is good. So we're not in danger of losing it.
That's like a 40-to-1 local dollar to.
Yeah, it's always a good deal.
It's always a good deal.
That's pretty good.
You never want to turn down a federal funding. Comes with attached, strings attached, but they have the goal. So, and speaking of which, we're still moving forward. You're probably seeing some construction on the former Hertz property just north of the terminal here. There's construction going on in there right now. That is primarily to accommodate the city's EMS service that's starting on July 1st. So if you're not aware, they're taking back the ambulance service operations into the city of Salem Fire Department. So half of that building will be leased out to city EMS, and that will be their administrative offices for their EMS operations until they someday find another piece of property and build a future permanent home. So So we're working diligently on that. We are intending to have that ready for them to move in by April 1st so that they have time then to get launched on July 1st, midnight, July 1st and midnight. The other half of the building is being designed and developed for our administrative offices so that we can pick up and move when we need to pick up and move. So all the pieces, I'm trying to put all the pieces together so that they all happen, the dominoes fall in the right order. So that actually was a good purchase. Rick asked that question earlier. We did buy that property just about a year and a half ago, and now it's starting to pay dividends already. So we're ready to get out of our own way, which is great. So if you see construction over there, that's primarily what that's about. We don't have any plans to move yet. We'll stay here until we absolutely have to move. Master plan update. This is an interesting one. The latest update is that we have a city council work session scheduled for Tuesday, February 18th. To discuss the future of the airport's infrastructure, which does include the primary or the secondary runway and all of the associated taxiways and infrastructure that goes with that. So this has been on pause for over a year now. And while formal council action can't be taken in work sessions, it's information and discussion only. We would have to come back to city council for any kind of a formal action. There will be no decision on the runway that evening. It will be presentations by myself and our consulting firm to get the city. We have a lot of new city councilors and a new mayor to get everybody kind of a little bit of history on when the master plan started, why it's been paused, so I'm trying to remember, was the AAC's decision to go ahead and keep you guys on there, and Mike would just be the AAC liaison?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
I think I might be replacing Doug.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Might reach out to Doug and ask him, but
Okay.
there was some conversation. I think that
Okay.
I volunteered, and I think Doug's like, I can step aside.
That's why I asked.
So
Just want to be sure. So I need to let our consultants know. So as we start ramping back up the planning advisory committee meetings and reaching out to the right people. So perfect.
Do you want, or is it appropriate to have any commission representation at that session or sitting in the hall? Or is that a council only kind of
I
thing?
guess a good time to ask. I haven't been to a work session in over a decade, so I don't know how they typically have commissioners and staff and public.
Oh, they're public meetings, you're welcome to attend, but work sessions don't typically have public comment. Unless the council desires that, but normally it's not a public hearing, so.
Okay.
But if you want to observe and get a sense of what their feelings and questions are.
And are those in the council chambers? Used to be in the Anderson room in the library, but
Yeah, they're in
Last
the
week it was in the chamber.
okay, so there's more room there. Sounds like you're welcome to come. It is a public meeting, but again, there's no Q&A or deliberation or vote or anything like that, but.
Okay.
So that's the next step, and then from there, we'll have future steps. And so again, our goal is to have this wrapped up by the end of 2025, now that we've got a full year of commercial air service under our belts, and that was one of the reasons the FAA wanted to pause it. I'm gonna skip a bunch of the upcoming projects because it's all just stuff we've talked about in the past. I think with that, I'll leave my report there. Upcoming projects are still upcoming. There are a lot of them. I won't bore you here for the next 30 minutes talking about a bunch of stuff. Doesn't make sense to you, but we have some projects happening this summer out on the ramp. One's a concrete parking position for the 737 because the asphalt's not gonna last very long. The other's just some security fencing out here on the ramp for vehicles coming on and off the secured ramp. So that's our next federal project, which already got punted from last summer to the summer. So we're hopeful there'll be no federal freezing of funds or anything like that, so we can get our projects up and operational. I understand that that's some federal judge did a stay on the federal funding freeze because that does impact us not only in grant funding but also our minimum revenue guarantee funds to the airline. Those frozen either. They send us an invoice. We need to.
I thought that was cleared by the city commerce, or I thought that was a separate fund, was managed.
The matching funds are the community's funds through Travel Salem, but the 70% of them are through a USDOT grant. So my guess is those won't be frozen for long.
So did that make it this EAS? Then,
It could impact EAS.
I mean, this isn't considered EAS? is it?
No, it's
Okay.
not an EAS airport. No. No, our grant is a small community air service development grant. So
Okay.
it's a pot of funding similar to EAS, and it's used for development of air service at small airports. So that money is what is being used to keep the airline whole.
Is there any available information that you can comment on about how that's structured. If I recall, if they don't meet a certain load factor, then we pull from that fund. Is that right?
Close. So it's not so much about load factors. They identified in the contract, with us and with the DOT, what it costs to operate each leg of a flight. So let's just say it's $25,000 to fly round trip to Burbank. They sell X number of tickets, they generate this much revenue, and then the grant backfills the difference. So
And do we have, I mean, again, the obvious question is that they've been changing and reducing some of the routes, so we're not having to backfill for some of that then.
right, the fund is actually in healthy shape.
Okay.
So it's a two-year project. It actually ends up October 4th of this coming year. And they're more than a year through the project and they haven't expended even 50% of the fund.
Okay, good.
The months that we expect is just like last year's January, February, those are low load factor months. But now we're not having to backfill Las Vegas because they paused that flight for 3 months. So that'll protect the fund. And then September, post holiday season, there's usually a lull in there. So those are the months that generally we see invoices from them. But yeah, the fund's actually in really healthy condition. What we don't use, we have to return to the DOT, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it makes our next application that much stronger. If we're actually not expending all the funds, they're more likely to grant us an additional. We couldn't apply until 2026, but we certainly will apply for another round of funding for additional air service developments. That's our goal. So I'll leave my report there. I could go on and on, but it would take a lot of time. Always happy to field any questions.
Any additional questions for John?
One brief question.
Sure.
If I remember right, when I got my handbook, it had a whole contact sheet in the front.
Oh.
Any chance you can share updated versions of that?
Jody, are you on?
I am here.
You can see and hear. Excellent. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't actually even have a current contact sheet.
Okay.
If you haven't yet, will you please update with all the new commissioners, and with Mayor Hoy as the liaison, just update that whole sheet when the terms expire, that whole thing, and then just distribute that to the entire AAC group so that we all have current info.
Sure. Yeah. Did I hear right that you're talking about a contact sheet?
Yeah, well, in the front of mine, there's the the one we look at every once in a while. It's like a matrix. It's got everybody's contact info,
Oh, yeah.
terms, all of that on there. Yeah, mine's way out of date.
Absolutely.
Still has Counselor Nordyke on here. John Foley, I don't know who that guy is. Mine says Neil Light. That's been a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do
Yeah,
that.
thank you, Jody. Just distribute that to everybody this week. That'd be super. Okay, that's it for me.
Any other questions?
I have one. What is EAS?
Oh, Essential Air Service.
Okay, so like in an emergency.
No, it's a federally funded program that's sort of left over from airline deregulation, and I think it was 1979 when the federal government deregulated airlines. Any airports that had air service at that time, the federal government actually gives those airports funds. It's called Essential Air Service to continue. So Pendleton is an EAS airport. They fly a 9-seat aircraft to PDX twice a day. I think that the federal government pays to backfill like a revenue guarantee. So it's a little bit of a contentious annual federal, I don't know, subsidy is not really the right word, but it's one of those that is always talked about in terms of, is it a place to cut federal funding? How long does the federal government provide funding for small airports that can't sustain their service on them? The question that Commissioner Burkholder asked is, are we an EAS airport? We are not. Salem did not have air service when the airlines deregulated.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Appreciate it. Good question.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the chair report. And then I will say I have nothing to report for tonight other than to say it's been a pleasure to work with you all for the last 8 years. There's been a lot of fun, cool stuff happening at the airport. In that time, not the least of which is the reintroduction of commercial air service. So it's been very cool to be, at least an inside observer to that whole process. So that was a lot of fun, and I know you all will be in good hands going forward. So I look forward to
Appreciate you
all the
steering this
news.
right.
All right. With that said, let's move on to the next part where we can get rid of it. So the next guy is action items, and I think the only action item we had was election of officers. So first off, we'll start with nominations for the chair position. and then we'll do a vote. And then we'll proceed with the nomination and election of the vice chair. So I'll open the floor for nominations for chair of the Airport Advisory Commission. Are there any nominations?
Nominate Mike Morrow.
All right, we've got one nomination for Mike Morrow. Any other nominations? All right, I guess I can we move to close the nominations? Just so, all right, yeah, I guess vote to close nominations. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Good.
Aye.
All right, so we have, I'd like to go ahead and do a vote. All in favor of electing Mike Morrow to be chair of the Airport Advisory Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No opposed, Mike. Excellent.
All right, congratulations, Mike. All right, moving on. I'll open the floor for nominations for the vice chair position. Are there any nominations?
Nominate Chris.
All right. Any other nominations? All right, I'll ask for a motion to close the nominations. All right, all in favor of closing nominations for vice chair?
Aye.
All right, and then let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of electing Chris Burkholder to be vice chair of the Airport Advisory Commission, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, by unanimous vote.
John grabs his coat and heads out. the
All
door.
right. So congratulations on our new chair and vice chair, Mike and Chris.
Be a big change.
Now that there's a new chair, would you like to take over presiding over the rest of the meeting, or are you?
Sure, as long as it's nothing complicated. Looks like the next agenda item are items for commission discussion. I had two at the beginning and you've answered them both, so. Thank you.
New guys, anything for the commission discussion?
I can think of.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Good to have everyone here.
Hey, if I could, just like to say, John, I actually watched your brief to the city council last night, and I thought you did a fantastic job telling the group on what what we've discussed over the last several meetings. So I just, whatever that's worth.
I appreciate that, Colonel. Thank you. I was thinking John Foley and I didn't see him there last night. So I appreciate it. The name Nathan Edgecombe came up in a separate item at the city council. I assume that's you unless.
It is me. Yeah, a retired Army buddy of mine went into a little business, and that annexation property is, I mean, I could almost hit it with a baseball from from where I live. So I want to make sure it didn't get developed in a terrible way like some of the other stuff.
I wondered, the name came up and Mark and I looked at each other and we thought it'd be pretty coincidental, but it was a different Nathan Edgecombe. So
Yeah, Edgecombe's a pretty rare name. So it is me. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the comments. Thank you. I hope that it's well received by council. And so thanks for that feedback.
Yeah.
I can second those comments.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I was, it's terrible listening to yourself and I'm not good at presentations. Even this is very, very unsettling for me after all these years. I don't like public meetings.
That was this the first reading?
This was the first reading, yeah. So actually, and I apologize, I should have covered that in my update. So last night was the first reading of the code amendments that we talked about in the December special meeting. That was, so there was some discussion, a little presentation, some good questions from the council, mayor and council, and they did approve to move it to the second reading, which is in 2 weeks. So February 10th will be the second reading of that code amendment. And we'll also, I think the fee resolution I found out today goes after that.
Apparently,
It's gonna be a future meeting after. So after the second reading, if that's approved by council, then there's a 30-day window for the code to actually take effect. So it would be until sometime in March. We'll take a fee resolution at that time, which just assesses the fee, that changes the landing fee number, that increases them a little bit, and that'll be a mid-year change. So we're gonna do that ahead of the budget.
So you said 2 weeks to the.
2 weeks. So
second
February 10th is the second reading. Yep.
reading? Okay.
And so if you, as the chair now, if you do get any public comment or anything like that, sometimes the public will send comments to us. So we heard some comments in here. Hannah did a written one to the council too. Sometimes they'll go directly to the council or through the city recorder. Sometimes people think they just need to send them to us or to you. If you get any of those, any of you get any public comment on any of that, just go ahead and send it to me and I'll get it up to the city recorder to be included in the public comments.
Yeah, I was unable to attend and haven't watched the replay. Was there any public comment last night aside from the written submissions?
Nope.
Okay. Okay,
Thank you for that reminder.
any other commission discussion? Going once, went twice, and we'll adjourn the meeting and express our heartfelt gratitude to John and your service, and hopefully we'll see you on the strategic.
Yeah, on the
So that's
side.
good. I'm glad you're gonna be.
Planning or master planning committee.
Now he can come out with his guns firing. Jody, stop recording because we're done with the meeting. Colonel, good to see you.